I think it's funny that sometimes people will group polyamory separate from LGBTQ plus, right? Because from my perspective, the Rainbow Club involves pretty much everything. And so I put polyamory in that community.
You're listening to Squeeze Limes, where truth stings, laughs heal, and nothing's off limits. I'm Tyler, the daughter.
I'm Robin, the mom. And if life gives you lemons,
we're squeezing limes instead.
So grab a seat, open your mind, and get ready to laugh or cry, because we're not here to play nice.
We're here to get real. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Squeeze Limes. We're doing an episode with Dr. Ariana Caesar for the Limelight. She is a physical therapist specializing in women's and pelvic health. She recently published her obstetrics research on lower back pain and pregnancy and currently works on the labor and delivery unit of a major hospital in Nashville, Tennessee. Outside the hospital, she runs a small women-owned business focusing on pregnancy and postpartum fitness, return to running postpartum and sexual and pelvic health education for people of all ages and genders. When she's not working, you'll find her trail running, skiing, dancing, or creating art and music. She's a passionate advocate for women's and LGBTQ plus rights and a member of the rainbow community herself. We're excited to have her with us today. Welcome, Ari.
Hello.
Welcome, Ari.
We're
Thanks for
excited
being
to have
on.
you. Yes, thank you so much for joining us today.
Can you share a bit about your journey to understanding and embracing your identity as a polyamorous woman within the LGBTQ plus community?
Yeah, I think it's funny that sometimes people will group polyamory separate from LGBTQ plus, right? Because from my perspective, the Rainbow Club involves pretty much everything. And so I put polyamory in that community. And where I've found that I fit in there is bisexual and non-monogamous. And so non-monogamy is a giant umbrella term for anything other than your typical cis-het mono relationship. The different ways that people can practice polyamory is what makes it so interesting. Like every single relationship and every single person can have their own spin on it and their own way of practicing. And so I find that, over the years, it's funny to look back retrospectively and be like, oh, I was always like this. And then I didn't have the words for it. And so in my mid-20s, really coming into figuring out how to articulate my feelings, how to articulate my identity has been so pivotal in my happiness and my livelihood and relationships and friendships even, and really figuring out how to name myself as bisexual, non-monogamous, polyamorous, and then be able to kind of have that explanation to share with other people so they can better understand how to relate with you. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm happy for you, really.
Thanks. Yeah,
Yeah,
me
it's
too.
an amazing thing. And I feel like there's so many young people that do feel the way that you do and don't have those words to articulate exactly how they identify or feel. And so I think it's so important to have education around, not only just labels, because, at the end of the day, labels don't truly matter, but it's just to have the words to really understand how you feel and how you present yourself into the world. And I think that's so important in society.
I so wish that all of the different styles of relationship and relating and fitting into society were presented to us when we were younger, right? Because you could
Yeah.
save millions of people
Lives.
a lot of anxiety, a lot of lives, a lot of heartbreak if they had options for representation of what their life could look like, And it would have been really nice if I didn't spend the first 25 years of my life thinking that something was wrong or that I didn't fit in or that, I was some kind of like non-committal problematic person when
Mm.
really it's just that my brain works a different way and it's completely normal and it's totally fine and much more common than people think. And it's been nice, at least now as an adult to like find other slightly older adults in their 40s, 50s, 60s that are great representations of doing non-monogamy well throughout the lifespan. It's not just like a young people like woohoo for fun thing. So it's been really
Right.
nice to like see that carried out, that people do have a happy time expressing and living this lifestyle long term. But as a kid, it would have been really nice to see different relationships modeled. There are trios, there are hierarchical relationships, there's solo poly where someone's their own anchor partner and they have other relationships but no primary partner. There's just so many ways to structure things. And
Hmm.
similar with, gay and lesbian representation, trans representation, like when adults are open about that and other people can see themselves thriving in, represented by someone else, it just opens the door for self-expression and self-acceptance that can start a lot earlier and save people a lot of time in therapy, probably.
Yeah. Yeah,
Sure.
you're absolutely correct. I wish
Yeah.
that was the case.
So
Yeah.
curious, as someone that has found the language and found the resources and found your inspiration of people that you look up to, I'm assuming you
Mhm.
have people that you're like, wow, I'm seeing their lives happy and beautiful the way that I want to live it, and the
Mhm.
structures that you hold close to your heart. My question is, what would you say to parents, um, just flat base, like, how can we educate kids? Because I think there's a lot of friction around educating children, and I struggled, not struggled, I pushed a lot of boundaries when I was a teacher around that because I wanted to educate children on
Yeah.
how important it is to see representation across the board. So, what do you have to say about educating children from a young age?
We need more teachers like you, honestly. And there's a whole infrastructure that needs to be rebuilt for that to be sustainable, but we need more teachers like you. Um, there are a lot of children's books that are geared towards navigating that conversation at a childlike level of understanding in an appropriate way. Um,
Mhm.
because really, like, yes, like sex is involved and that's like a big component of it, but the relationships, the life structure, the like lifespan overlap of like, people and their partners are combining finances and raising children and sharing houses. And like, there's real life stuff that are in these relationships outside of just the intimacy. And all of that is really appropriate for children to see, like how people structure their lives. Sans the more adult content of it is like completely explainable. And so there are different children's books, and I can look up some links that have, different styles of whether that's two parents or two parents of the same gender or multiple parents, and just normalizing it and not really presenting it as like this is a far out thing that like we need to be aware of that like is okay, but it's like something strange. Just normalizing it and presenting it like, look at all these different ways that people live. Like, this person plays soccer, this person plays basketball, this family has two moms, this family has three dads. And it's
Mhm.
like the
Just
less
as
of a
simple as that.
hurdle, yeah, the less of a hurdle that it's presented as, the more normalized it can be. And so I think
Mm.
like with kids, just addressing it like you would anything else, not making a big deal out of it. Um,
Yeah.
and I've seen some better representation in TV recently. Um,
Oh, yeah.
that I have like two examples that come to mind. One is Schitt's Creek, which is one of the best TV shows I've ever seen.
I
But
love
what I
Ever,
love
ever.
ever, the amount of Alexis Rose that I embody is like frightening. But the
you,
what I love the most.
David.
Oh my god, yeah. What I love the most about it, I have a
There you
mug in
go.
my
The whole thing.
kitchen that's like, "You, David, David. It's like got the whole script on it.
I
Um,
love it.
but David and Patrick's relationship is completely par for the course. There's not some huge hurdle. There's not some sob story of them overcoming societal barriers. The community's not
Mm.
against. It's like it just is. They just are a couple and it's the same as everyone else. And with him and Stevie talking about like pansexuality and the wine metaphor,
Ugh,
it's
I loved
just
the wine
normalized.
metaphor. Can you
Yeah, yeah.
say it for whoever hasn't watched the show?
So
I thought that was so
David
great.
and Stevie are in like a liquor store or something, and he's trying to explain that sometimes he likes red wines and sometimes white wines and sometimes rosé, and just alluding to the myriad genders that he is interested in because he's pansexual. And it's just such a great metaphor for like, I just like wine, any person,
Right.
as long as it's a good person, as long as it's a good wine. But
Yes.
that show is really nice because just it just lets those characters exist without them being the focal point of like a trial and tribulation to get there.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
and then there was another Netflix show, I think it was Netflix, that it was this show through time of families that lived in the same house. So it was like a family in the 50s
Mm.
and then the 80s and then modern day. And so it would be like time warp
I
of
think I
showing.
think I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about. It
yeah,
was
yeah,
really
yeah.
good. Yes.
It was really good. And the modern day house has a trio that's living there. It's a married couple and their girlfriend. And like, I was like really excited about it at the beginning of the show, but then she turns out to be like a murderer. And so I was like, oh,
Oh.
darn it.
Maybe
Like,
that's
yeah. So like, granted, like polyamory wasn't the issue in that relationship. It was like the murder. So I was like, well, I
but it
think
was
that still
actually the
counts.
norm,
Yeah, I was like,
right,
that
of
still counts as, like,
today.
a positive light,
It does, yeah.
Yeah, but too bad she was a murderer. But it's a
Too
really
bad.
good show.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh
But
my
that's
god.
what I think is coming is that's just gonna be the norm, and, it's for all of us to keep on talking about,
Yeah, and the more
spreading it. Yeah.
educated that people are in general, the more space people can hold for variety, and the better understanding and empathy people can have for people that are different than themselves. Like, I don't hold any negativity towards straight people, you know? Like, it's just
Right,
different.
Right.
right.
It's just
Right.
different,
That's
and I think
exactly
I
right,
think
that's
probably
perfect.
the minority, if you think about straight versus literally anything else, it's, like, funny to me that straightness and, like, heteromonormativity is the norm when it's, like, the most narrow path, and so, like, and I really feel like
Right. It's
Right.
people
the most
people think that it's, like,
traditional in the sense
yeah.
that, like, this is the representation that's happening.
Yeah, and that's,
Sorry, go
colonialism
ahead.
and yeah, colonialism and then cultural barriers that create that narrow lens. But when you think about like, okay, if the option is A or B, which is every single other possibility, like it's B's gotta be the majority. And I think when people start to realize that like most people are outside the box in some way and unique, and when you take off the monogamy blinders, relationships will blossom, even if people stick within monogamy, right? We call it conscious monogamy, where instead of blindly following the
Mhm.
path that you think you're supposed to because you're supposed to date, get engaged, get married, have kids, die, right? So when you step out of that box and you're like, how do I reevaluate
Wow.
you're like, how do I reevaluate what my expectations and wants are for myself versus societal expectations? And even if think about all the possibilities and you come to the conclusion that you're like, you know what? I'm a one person kind of person and I've thought about everything else that can come into that and this is my decision. That's perfect. That's what I would want for anyone is to have an informed decision of how they're going to approach living their life versus just falling into what they think they should do without thinking. Because, you know, it doesn't matter what your decision ends up being, but I wouldn't want someone to be deprived of the knowledge of what they could be and given the opportunity to decide that.
Right. We're not cookie cutter people,
Yeah.
and I know that we have derived from that, but that is the truth. Monogamy was really just because of religion, I think, in the
Mhm.
very beginning, I think. But I also know that researchers show that human beings aren't supposed to be monogamous in some form, just like some animals are not. I think there's one
Mhm.
animal, right? Penguins that are forever for life, death, and that's unbelievable to
Isn't
watch.
it
But
cute that there are gay
we're all
penguins, though?
mammals in a sense.
Sure, there are gay penguins that they'll, like, propose with their little rock to each other. It's so cute.
I didn't know that. I thought it was like for the purpose of reproduction that they find their soulmate. But that's true because if they don't, yeah, that's right.
But
Because they will
they'll
only
take
stay with
on
that or no
yeah,
one,
they'll take on eggs that
right?
have been abandoned or if, like, of another parent dies, and it's, like it's just so cute.
So there are many misconceptions around polyamory. And what are some of the biggest ones that you personally wish people would understand?
I think one is that it's, like, approved cheating, which is
Mm,
so far off base because from what I've found, at least personally, I am the most loyal to rules that I set, like standards I have for myself. I I mean, you know me, I'm like kind of defiant and I question authority. And so like if someone is telling
okay.
me like someone is like, "Oh, this is how you're supposed to live and behave." I'm like, is it though? Like let me figure that out for myself." And so the whole structure of monogamy, it's like someone is telling you what to do. Granted outside of conscious monogamy, like coming to that decision on your own, but it's like people don't really respect the boundaries that are set by that because they haven't set it themselves. It's
Mm,
handed to them as like a rule book, as a structure. And so what I find interesting is that people will be scared of polyamory because of the instability, the high bandwidth that it takes to operate in that way, and the multiplicity of life in that way. Like the amount of emotions that you're holding and relationships that you're maintaining. Like it's a lot. And some people don't have the bandwidth for that. Some people do. But monogamy is not protective. Like
mm,
monogamy in no way, shape, or form protects someone from cheating or leaving or whatever. Um, Obviously the divorce rate is high, like, and it's not like it's just societally not like a safety net. And so it's weird to me that people look at polyamory and think, "Oh, that's like so dangerous. What a threat to me to have my person with other people," when
mm,
they could be doing that behind your back when you think everything's hunky-dory at home and you don't know because you don't talk about it or you don't explore the feeling of why do they wanna be with other people? Is that actually a threat? Is there anything wrong with that? If it's, like, against someone's boundaries and loyalty, yes, there's something wrong with that. If it's agreed upon and enjoyed and discussed and pre-approved, like, no, there's nothing wrong with that. You could do whatever you want as long as it's within the agreement that you've made with other people. You know, as long as
right,
you're not
exactly.
hurting anyone else, you're not doing anything illegal, then go for it. But it's
But
like the misconception that it's like this like weird kind of like backdoor excuse to get away with stuff is so off base. Because I mean, and when I have like serious partnerships, like we go through a full relationship agreement. We're like, how do we approach these conflicts? How do we structure dates? How do we structure our communication around, you know, leaving for an event with someone else and coming back and reconnecting? How do we
mhm,
structure our boundaries and what we share with other partners versus just each other? So there's so much communication that goes into it that can go into monogamous relationships too. And it would just make those so much better and so much better understood. But
mm,
it's such a huge level of communication. And some people practice in a way where it's like, don't ask, don't tell. That's not how my brain operates. I would freak out if I didn't know what was going on. But for some people that works is to just compartmentalize and be like, I'm with my partner, and when they're with someone else, I don't know. Like that's
right.
great for other people. But just I think the misconception of it being kind of this like weird free for all too. Like you know,
Yeah.
it's just a much more serious thing emotionally than it is like a sexual adventure, which it can be and is fun, but there's, like, so much more depth to it, um, of the relationships and the romantic friendships and the long-term partnerships, like, some people will be in each other's lives, you know, as romantic friends or as partners forever, and
Mhm.
those are serious people in that person's life. They're not just, like, you know, a fun one-night stand because you can, just go off and do whatever.
Right, exactly. You were talking about like threatened, the threat, and
Mhm.
people misunderstand that. I have friends that are polyamorous, and I think they're afraid of the threat from the monogamous people.
Hmm.
That monogamous people feel threatened by this because it's like, ooh, I want to try. And so it kind of like breaks rules and boundaries. And that's why I think it's so separated, which I'm praying that it won't be because it doesn't make sense. But I
Yeah.
think there's a little bit of a threat around that.
I think there's sometimes unfortunately a little bit of sexism too, where within like bisexuality, sometimes there's the issue of like, well, like you can experiment with women, that's fine, that's not cheating. The fact that that's like not
Hmm.
considered, you know, it just like it's like, oh, you don't value that woman as like a whole individual person, So it's like giving kind of like demeaning pass to be like, oh, you can go play with that. That doesn't count. Those people count. Everybody at some point will experiment and like figure out what they like. But
Hopefully.
that threat
Or what
of
they're
like,
attracted to, they think, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Yeah.
yeah, or the threat of like, oh, on the other side of things, like, am I an experiment for this person? Like, am
Mhm.
I
Mm,
just their figuring it out playground? And do they
Right.
actually like me, or am I that hall pass? So there's like all of the kind of the reverse side of being poly on the other end when someone is like in their exploring phase, and then there's like kind of a mismatch there of level of understanding of what's going on.
That must
I know.
be really tough because, you don't know. And like you said, you communicate so much with the people that you're in relationships with. And I'm sure, you cross all of those boxes off when you're talking about, what that's going to look like for you guys. And, um, but I can only imagine that's really tough if you're kind of being played a little bit. Um, and like, of course, you want to honor them and being experimental and like trying to find like this new way for themselves, but also you want to be protective of yourself and know that whatever you're specifically looking for is a good match.
That comes back to the visibility of the poly community and the non-monogamous community, because the more that people are open about it, the more that people will hear the terminology and the words that most resonate with them and give them the diving board to jump off of, educating themselves and researching themselves of all the different things that they want to learn about. I remember when I was sitting on my floor in my New York City apartment with one of my best friends from PT school, and she was like, "Well, just Google your feelings." Like, why on earth didn't I think of that? I don't know. Like, so I'm just like, okay, this is how I feel about relating to people in general. And we Googled what my feelings were, and like all these words started coming up, and we were like, oh my God, like this is it. This perfectly explains what I'm feeling. Why didn't anybody tell me this before? Like, we
Right.
have sex ed in middle school and high school, and granted, that's a whole other problem in this country, but
Huge.
like that could have been brought up a little bit,
Right.
like at
Right.
all, like the terminology. And so I try to be open about it. Like I recognize completely my privilege and safety in being able to be open about it. Um, and my educational background and professional background in sexual health, like I am really lucky that I have a platform and that I have safe friends and supportive family. Um, but I recognize the difficulty for other people that don't have that kind of community, or that they don't know that they have that kind of community because they haven't talked about it before. And so
Right.
they
They
haven't like
carry so
even
much
bridged.
shame. Right.
Yeah, yeah. And so just the internet is great because you can find stuff out on your own without having to go ask a librarian or a family member or whoever that you're too scared or embarrassed or shy to ask. And so I think at least in this setting, social media um, and just internet resources are so valuable for people to be able to explore with privacy,
Hmm.
until they can get a better grasp on like what it is they are thinking about and looking at. And then from there, you'll find community options to join, like different dating apps and meetup groups and things like that. And so it's really special too when people are able to find community in this.
Yeah, absolutely. The people that I know have been poly for 20, 30 years, and I feel like there's workshops all over this country and probably the world, but in this country, and they go and they speak to that for these, 4 or 5 day workshops. It's incredible because people want to know more. And so
Hmm.
in on a smaller venue, you can find that
Yeah,
and explore that on a weekend or whatever that really gets you involved, on many levels. It's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
The the best resource, and I've worked with her since participating in this with her, but Dr. Jolie Hamilton absolutely saved my livelihood. Like, she gave the resources, the education, the structure, the community in this year-long course.
Mm,
Just it's like group discussion and structured exercises of like self-reflection to really get to the root of like, how do you want to approach relating, and in any direction. It's not necessarily geared towards polyamory. Like, some people come to the conclusion of monogamy, but um
that
it's
they're questioning.
yeah,
That's
but
why they're there. Yeah.
she has so many resources, and she's studied jealousy and researched that, and
Mm.
um, the way that she creates such a safe community space for people to talk together. I was just on a meeting on Thursday with her and some of the other people from the group that I was in and other groups, and it's just so nice to have a community to talk and people that have really invested time in their self-discovery and their communication skills and learning how to approach um, different types of relationships. And so she has, yeah, this like amazing course and a bunch of other resources as well, a podcast. And but me struggling through 2020 whatever 3 and trying to figure out what was going on. um, I found her and I found these resources, and it like just brought me out of such darkness of feeling like I was either wrong or alone or like grasping at straws to try to figure things out by myself. But having a community to do that together with is just life changing.
Absolutely. That's amazing that you have found a community that you can, be yourself and do this self reflective process in order to be the best version of you
Hmm.
and then be the best version for any relationship that you hold. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
It's
And
So,
so
just to have a
peaceful.
sounding board of people in similar
right?
situations where it's like, hey, this new issue that I've never experienced has come up. I don't know how to handle it. Has anybody else experienced this? And y- more times than not, someone's like, oh, yeah, this is how we handled that, or this is the communication tools that we used for that. And it's like really helpful to have, whether it's relationship or life or work or whatever, just other communication tools that you can draw from other people. It's really, really nice.
It's great energy. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you navigate conversations about polyamory with people who may not understand or who make assumptions about it?
I typically start with explaining how my brain works and why it feels more peaceful to me to operate this way. I mean, it's not a choice, like it's an identity. I've always been this way. I've known my entire life that the idea of monogamy was not for me, and that's like weird to say having been in like multiple monogamous relationships, but
Yeah.
it's also interesting to look back retrospectively and realize like the feelings and the processing was always there. And I try to explain you can't really control what you're attracted to. Like, some people like blueberries, some people don't like blueberries. There's not really any reason for that. You just don't. And you don't have to explain it, and you really don't have to think about it more than that. So it's like, some people like people of the same gender, some people like people of the opposite gender, or, any gender. And it's like, you don't have to think more about why, it just is. I'm allergic to cats. Why? I don't know. I just am. Like, it's just
Right.
part of
It's so
me.
simple.
Yeah, and so I think the digging and digging and digging into like the why isn't always the most important thing, rather than taking that energy and putting it towards exploring how.
Mm,
It doesn't matter why that's your orientation, but how are you going to best fill your life with things that fill your cup and the way that your brain processes. And so trying to explain to people that aren't familiar with it, mostly just the vocabulary. There are so many words and like the learning curve of all the terminology because there are so many nuanced things about polyamory. Like there's a fire hose to the face of vocab words and like hierarchical dyad and all of these things that you're just like, what does that mean? And so
Wow.
when I have conversations with people that are new to it, a lot of it is like slowing down and being like, okay, these are a ton of new words. Let me know if anything is overwhelming, not understood, scary, whatever, and trying to like kind of just backpedal a little bit into getting the vocabulary down so that we can actually have a conversation about polyamory. Because if
mm,
you don't have the terminology to discuss it, similar to like, talking about not knowing about it when you're younger, like language is the tool for understanding. So if you don't have the language to talk about it, you're not going to understand it very well. So that's typically a little bit of like a vocab day of like
So what's like the
understanding.
typical vocab like that you can teach us today?
Some of the things that come up the most are like descriptors of relationships, whether that's like a dyad, so like two partners that are each other's primary partner versus like primary and secondary partners. So a primary partner might be a nesting partner, so that's someone that you live with and you share a home with, and a secondary partner might be a less intense relationship. They live in their own place, or I mean, they could live with you and just have like a separate level of intimacy and overlap, but things like that. So like the structure of things, and there's hierarchical polyamory. So that's where people have different roles of intensity, of overlap, whether that's financial, emotional, family, children, um, social time, like things that are more prioritized with certain partners over others. Then there's kitchen table polyamory, where everybody's kind of on the same playing field. So that could be like a polycule of, let's say, 5 people that all live together. They all share finances. Like, could you imagine a quintuple income household? That's going to be an amazing house.
I was going to
Um,
say,
but
wow,
yeah, yeah. Um,
everybody, right?
yeah, would be in this economy. Yeah, would be great.
Yeah, yeah.
right.
But so things like that, like a throuple or a quad, or you get into higher numbers and you just say polycule. But those are like different structures of relationship. And so kind of getting better words to define like the people and the roles in polyamory.
As far as work relationships and balance, you work in women's pelvic health and even published research in obstetrics. How has your professional experience shaped your perspective on sexual health, identity, and inclusivity?
Um, I have a like surprising amount of poly and non-monogamous patients, which is kind of entertaining because they don't know about me. I don't talk about my personal life, but I understand so much what they come to me with and what they talk about, and they're like, "Wow, this is so nice, like, you just get it." And I'm like, "Haha, yeah, I do, like, you don't know why, but I really do." And
Like
so
it
it's
adds a layer to your work.
yeah, it's just an extra layer of understanding and rapport that I can build with patients because I really truly understand, like, the nuance of things, and it does come up in the delivery room when I have, either like same-sex couples and working with the nursing staff on making sure they're addressing the other partner as the other partner and not like, "Oh, is that her friend?" "No, it's not her friend. That's the other mom," you know? Like, or
Hmm.
I've had in the delivery room multiple partners. So I've had like the 2 biological parents and the other partner who is just as much of a parent to that child as anybody else will be. And again, working with the staff on the inclusive language of the partners and making sure that they are also, paperwork is run by them, like official documents are run by them as well, so that they're not excluded just because they're not biologically involved. And yeah, working on the family unit language of like parents, birthing parent, because not the birthing parent doesn't necessarily identify as a woman. So if you have a non-binary parent that's delivering, just referring to them as the delivering parent, or the patient, or some more neutral term. Um,
What do you
but
do
really,
about what do you do about like if there is a C-section and they're only, I guess, I don't know if it's just Illinois, but I think it's countrywide that it's only your partner, one person can be in there.
right.
That's not very fair. I mean, like uh, multiple
What really grinds my gears
levels.
about that is that you'll have like 100 med. That's an exaggeration. You won't have 100 med students in there, but you'll have like 3, 5, 10 extra people in there observing, learning, right? Like, which I am for the forward movement of science and education. But like, if you can fit a first year med student into C-section, you could fit their other partner. Like, I do not want to hear OR staff excluding a parent of that child because of it's too small of a room and there's not enough people. You know what?
Right.
The first year med student can catch another one. Like,
Right. But it
it's
seems
just,
like it
yeah,
depends on the staff at that time, and it should be maybe just a law of that hospital you know what I mean, or of that state. So
yeah,
it's not like, well, if you have the really great nurse that, she'll let you in kind of thing. That's not okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know. And it's tough because the infrastructure around parenting is very monofocused. Um, right. There are like mother and father boxes to check for things. Parent teacher conferences, they'll invite 2 people, or like you get 2 tickets to a graduation or whatever.
Mm.
So a lot of
Mhm.
it is very, very exclusionary to having multiple people. And I kind of notice the same thing too sometimes with like emergency contact or weddings or things. Like, it's like, oh, you get a +1. I'm like, well, do I get like a +3?
Mm.
Or,
Right, right,
not trying to
right.
monopolize the food at someone's wedding, but it's just like the
But those things
inclusivity
have to
is
be
like
taken in consideration.
unconscious. Yeah,
Hmm.
and it's totally unconscious. It's not intentionally mean, but it's just such a norm that people get left out without even thinking about it? Um, and yeah, so like alerting staff in healthcare settings to someone's um lifestyle and their like number of partners so that they know who could be included or not. Because one of the like kind of safety things too is if someone is a healthcare proxy for someone else legally, right? They have all the paperwork, but if they're not the married partner, that can be usurped. There's like different legal implications for the authority that people have with one another's medical
Hmm.
records. And that is a bigger infrastructure problem to navigate. And that's not really on any like single hospital personnel. It's not like an unkindness or anything, but there's like legal forms that like then are exclusionary in like 3 or 4 group settings. Um, and so those are a little bit more nuanced, like legal work to do to establish multiple people in a partnership as like equal partners. So there's
Hmm.
just extra steps that people have to take too for being a medical proxy. But as far as the human interaction in the office, just being aware of using either neutral language when you don't know, or just starting with questions instead of being like, oh, are you her friend? Just be like, oh, how are you two related? Simple things where you're doing more open-ended and letting that person explain to you who they are and their status and their relationship is a lot less prickly than starting with an assumption and having to have them correct you or backpedal or shrink away because they they immediately feel like you're not recognizing their significance in the room.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
starting with just being open-ended, be like, who are you? Right
Hmm.
now?
Hmm.
Right. Absolutely. And we actually talked about that in our last interview with my cousins, Talia and Michaela,
Oh,
who are a married couple of same sex. And so it was one of their things was just address someone instead of like assuming maybe they're friends, be like, how are you related? Or is this your partner? Or is this your spouse? Or, make it open ended instead of is this your boyfriend or girlfriend? That's
Mhm.
kind of like the conversation we had with them. So you even saying that is reiterating the fact that as a society, we really need to come together and change our verbiage to more neutral and open ended conversations in order to have those that want to share if they feel comfortable to
Mhm.
share, instead of labeling and assuming. So
Yeah.
I think that that's really amazing that you touched on that.
I think
Yeah.
it really boils down to, like, to get very meta about it, right? Like, living in the gray. You know, with, like you mentioned earlier, like religion and colonialism has really enforced this binary, not just of gender, but of roles as well. And it is ludicrous to really bring the 7 billion people on the planet and try to filter all of them into one of two options. That is completely unrealistic. People are so nuanced and so
Mhm.
colorful and individual. And the idea that everybody would fit into one of two categories and one of two roles in society and all have the same family structure and the same relationship structure is just crazy. But it's a lot easier to not think for yourself and to just be sorted. And
That's
so
correct.
it makes me sad that society as a whole not necessarily has succumbed, but has been forced into not so much doing the self discovery work from the start, but being given A or B and following suit. And it is a lot more work to do self discovery. It's a lot more work to figure out your own path. It's a lot scarier. It feels like you're more alone. But at the end of the day, if you end up being the fullest version of your actual self, it is so worth that gray area and the extra work. And I feel like a lot of people will just take an option to avoid the pain of really looking at themselves.
Mhm.
And it's such a complex approach to being able to explain who you are to other people. But I
Hmm.
feel like when people really do put in that work and have an actual answer when someone says, "Who are you?" and you can answer that question, that's someone that you can share with someone else. If you don't have an answer, if someone's like, "Who are you?" Like, who really are you? What matters to you? What are your values? How do you move through life? How do you identify? And you don't have an answer, what are you sharing with someone when you get into a relationship, a friendship, a business
Or
partnership?
yourself. You don't
Right.
know
Like
yourself.
who are you, you know, when the lights are off and there's no noise and it's just your thoughts? And that's so much scarier than just picking from, you know, clothes hanger options of I'm going to be this, 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 and go on your merry way, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
I would love for everyone to have the bandwidth and the time, um, and the safety to do that exploration. And it's hard and it's scary, but the blinders are just, I think, such a hindrance to individuality, um, and that just societal barrier of like really expressing yourself. And it makes me so happy then to like be around people like the two of you and my friends and family who are colorful and are insightful and have explored themselves and, have passion and direction. And so it's just when you meet people that have done that work, it's just an extra spark, you know?
Yeah, it's great.
Absolutely.
It really is great. I
Absolutely.
feel like generations that are coming into this world fully are not going to be living like you guys or I did or my mother or, generation or even my grandparents' generation,
Mhm.
because that's kind of stuck, but they're not going to have this. They're not going to have two choices. They're going to be multifaceted no matter what because that's the way the world is. And so they're coming in at the perfect time, I think,
I'm
actually.
excited. I think, Generation Alpha and Beta G, like coming up with this multiplicity and acceptance and normalization of mental health, like there's a lot going on that's not ideal right now. But as far as the actual culture of people, like not people in charge, but real people that are actually living and, working and communicating and having this shared experience of a class consciousness and like forward movement in acceptance and expression. I'm so excited for people to step into that world with like people with our just worldview as their teachers, you know, and being able to come up in a world that's supportive of them becoming exactly who they are and not some, little soldier in line kind of thing.
Right. That's
So
right.
I am excited. I do have hope for that.
Definitely
Right.
do. I definitely do. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Squeeze Limes, we love asking this question at the very end. What does living your juiciest life mean to you right now?
Ooh, my juiciest life. I went out for a really long trail run yesterday, and it was just a magical, woody wonderland, and just being immersed in the colors and the quiet and staying out there after my run and doing some songwriting and just getting into that flow state. And I feel really settled here in Nashville now, and it's been really fun to again be like in the seasons because I grew up in California and
And you
same
were
with
in New York for a little bit, you
yeah.
were in Denver, now you're in Nashville.
Yeah, and, I really took the sun for granted, and I didn't really understand what people meant by, like, "I love seasons." I was like, "Yeah, we have, snow in Tahoe and the beach, so, like, bada bing, bada boom." And, now that I've lived in, like, multiple states, I get it, and I love the fall colors, and just getting outside and exploring and seeing nature be so stunning, and also in its, like, temperance, like, it's so short-lived to catch it at just the right moment, and how lucky am I to be there when the brightest reds and yellows and oranges are still up there. A lot of them had fallen, and it kinda made my depth perception when I was running a little bit difficult because, like,
Yeah.
I couldn't really see where the roots and the rocks were, so it took all of my focus not to trip and eat it, and I kinda like, having something that forces my brain to just shut up and focus, and
Yeah.
so
It's nice.
getting
It's
out on the
beautiful.
trails has been really, really good. Yeah.
So really
Awesome.
turning to nature and grounding yourself and being present in the
Yeah.
moment is your juiciest life.
Yeah, just slowing down a little bit.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well,
It
Ari,
is.
thank you so, so much for
Thank
joining us.
you.
It was such a pleasure to
It's a
talk to you.
great pleasure.
Um, and we're so honored to have your expertise in all the realms. And so thank you. And we're excited to see what the things that you do next.
Well, thanks for having
Absolutely.
me and for giving a little more visibility to the community, and I hope that somebody who needs to find some words finds the podcast and gets a little bit of
Absolutely.
clarity.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you for that. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Um, we appreciate you and tune in next time for Squeeze Limes. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
Be sure to follow, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a good squeeze.
Of course, everybody needs one.
See you next time on Squeeze Limes.